there everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Northwest Craftsman. Today I have a special treat for you. I'm going to be introducing a new tool to the workshop, and it's probably a tool that none of you have ever seen before, except for maybe some of you old timers where this was around for you. So the backstory behind this tool is that for a long time I've wanted to get a joiner. I've needed to get a joiner. It's really the last step that I had in order to prepare most of my lumber or most of my work pieces for woodworking, and I could see that it was kind of an issue as I went through and I put shelves together. My edges were not quite square, and I just really needed a joiner. So I was looking and looking and looking, but with COVID and everything else that's going on, jointers are really hard to come across. And so for about 6 months I'd been looking and wasn't able to find anything until I found this one jointer that wasn't actually a jointer. Alrighty, so without further ado, let me introduce you to the Rockwell Delta Uniplane. I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you how this unique tool works so that you get a good idea for what it is, and hopefully it also gives you a good idea on how a jointer works because it's got a very similar mechanism. Alright, let's get started. So first off, I want to go through and do a quick anatomy of the Uniplane itself. One, you've got your normal start-stop switch right here. I may replace that with a knee stop so that I can just push stop it without having the two separate buttons, but for now, those work great. This guy is your depth of fence adjuster, so it adjusts the fence right over here. You've got a central fence right here, and then a trailing fence, and then you've got your rotating blades all the way around. Your normal base that you would have right here is the same as on a jointer, and your fence is as well, although if you're looking like a traditional jointer does, this would be your base and this would be your fence, because on a traditional jointer, this is where your cutting faces are. But on the Uniplane, you have your blade on this guy right here or on your fence. And then your base actually has a lot more flexibility because you can rotate the angle on it. Oh, let me get that unlocked. And then you can shift it up to any angle that you want. Let me get the right angle on this. You can shift it up to any angle. Oop, forgot. There's an unlock over here too. You can shift it up to any angle you want, so you can actually joint at odd angles. So I can lock this in at really whatever angle I want. And with that, it gives me the ability to produce nice chamfers all the way across an edge, and just really opens up your opportunities for what you'd like to make, because you're no longer locked into 90 degrees only. But that does also come with the caveat that you need to make sure that I need to make sure that when I'm bringing this guy back down to 90 degrees, that it is always set to 90 degrees, because this has the ability to adjust while a regular jointer doesn't, which means a regular jointer will stay true far longer than this guy would. And so I'll be needing to make adjustments to this guy and see where it sits. But pretty cool right here. In the back, you've got a regular just dust extraction. Now, this one was designed long enough that aerodynamics was not really in consideration, and so you do have a dust extraction port right here. But when you look on the inside of it, it's not that it was meant to move chips from the cutting heads over to the dust extraction, and so it really just pulls some negative pressure in there and tries to collect some of the chips. But realistically, there's going to be a decent amount of chips that form on the bottom here, and this may require regular cleanings. And then in the back, there's just a motor. You can see at the top here, there's the little tiny housing where the belt comes through to turn this actual cutter head itself. And I'm not going to open that up so that you guys can see the motor, but it's just a regular old motor with the belt that comes up here to the top and turns this cutter head. So let's get into the nitty-gritty details on how exactly does this work and what is its purpose. Okay, so to strip it back down to the real basics, the purpose of a jointer as opposed to a thickness planer is to produce two flat perpendicular faces. And so what you really want to do, let me grab a piece of wood. What you're really trying to do is you want to say, I want this face and this face to be perpendicular and flat, so that then I can send it through the thickness planer and make sure that all of my faces are square and parallel to each other. Now, a thickness planer will get you somewhat flat, but it runs into issues when you get thinner pieces of wood, because it'll actually flatten out any of the bow that you have, and then it'll just pop right back as soon as it comes out of the rollers. Where a jointer, or in this case a uniplaner, on the other hand, does not have a lot of pressure on it, and so you can shave off the high tops all the way through there so that you get a nice flat face. But the question is, how does it do it, and how is this different than a regular jointer? So the way that a traditional jointer works is you have your in-feed table and your out-feed table, and then you've got your fence. Your fence is really just to keep things perpendicular to the sole itself, and what that allows you to do is when you're running your workpiece over the top, that's what gets you your two perpendicular faces. Now, what gets you that feature that is flat is the fact that you have two sides that are off the same height of each other, and so So what you're going to do is you're going to run your workpiece up over the top of these blades, and on the trailing side, it's going to catch it at the thickness that you've adjusted. So if you're pulling 1/8 of an inch off, your trailing table is going to be 1/8 of an inch higher so that it can catch your workpiece on the far side. So basically, you can shave everything up to 1/8 inch off. So then moving to the Uniplane, it's exactly the same concept, except for, as I said earlier, this is your fence and this is your sole, and this is your leading table. This is your leading edge and your trailing edge. Now, it's a little bit trickier with this one. So essentially, you use this depth control knob to rotate this, to push this back just a little bit. When you push this back, it comes over the top of the blades and it shaves off that portion that you would expect, and then you catch it on the tail end. Except on the Uniplane, rather than having a single cutting blade, there's kind of a triple cutting action. So if you'll look inside here, there are actually 2 different types of these cutter heads. Let me see if I can get a closer look. So I don't think I'm going to be able to adequately capture it on camera, but every single one of these cutter heads is slightly different from each other. You've got rough cutters and fine cutters, and what happens is, as your workpiece comes in through here, your rough cutters are sticking out about 2 thou further than your fine cutters, and they will take off the first pass, take off the vast majority of your workpiece, and then your fine cutters come through just a hair afterwards and take off the last 2 thou that you have right there. Now, what happens is you come across to the fence right here, and you'd say, well, this one and this one are probably at the same depth, except they're not. This one still has, I think it's 1 thou and maybe 2 thous. I need to double check the manual of drop to it, because then when you come across the final side, your smoothing or your fine cutters are going to hit it one more time, which gives you kind of a smoothing pass. So you rough it, you rough cut it, you fine cut it, and then you smooth it on the trailing side over here. And then just like that, when you have your workpiece traveling all the way across here, you end up with a flat and perpendicular face. Or if you don't want to be doing perpendicular, you can set this angle to whatever you want and get whatever angle you want off of it. So one of the other advantages to having cutter heads like this, rather than the wheel that you would get on a normal jointer, is that you can actually cut end grain with this. Now, you can cut end grain partially because of the cutter heads and the way that they're working, where they more scrape off the wood on your workpiece, but you can also do it because you have enough stability to move your end grain through here. So that's one of the things that you can't traditionally do on a jointer, is end grain, because you'll end up just tearing into your piece and actually tearing it apart, and you generally can't get enough stability when you're trying to work on end because your workpiece is too tall. Whereas in this case, it's a little bit easier to get the play on it or the leverage on it so that you can cut the end grain, and it's super, super cool. And in fact, in the original manual, they actually advertise cutting a match head, or it's safe to cut a match head on this. So yeah, end grain is another thing that you can do with this, which is super, super cool. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick demonstration of how this guy works in person, both on a face and on the end grain, so that you can see what it does. I'm not going to do any of the adjustments in this episode because there's going to be a whole slew of things that I need to go through and check, but we're going to go ahead and give this guy a once over and just give it a rundown. All right, here we go. Also, as a quick note before getting started, don't ever forget your hearing and eye protection. Alrighty, so here you go. This is what it looks like to do the end grain and 2 of the faces, and I just checked this guy, and this guy is just dead square. Actually, here, let me show you. So at least on my machine is square, everything is looking square. You can see just a little bit of light coming through the bottom. I don't know if that's coming through on camera, but I think that actually is coming from the grain structure in here and how soft the pine is. Yeah, just working with it, but overall, I mean, holy cow, how cool to be able to do your end grain and both your faces at the same time. I am just looking forward to getting to use this tool, although I can see that it's going to need some adjustment. I don't know if it's going to come through on camera. Let me see if I can't zoom in on it. So on each one of the different faces, you can see some circular patterns where the different blades were coming through, and I think what that means is that I need to either get new blades resharpened or well, and actually with how rough this grain is up here, I'd say that I probably need to get them sharpened. But then also I need to look at the depth, because if I've got circular striations coming through there, I bet you I'm just offset on all of them. And that's actually a pretty standard process with these guys as I was reading through the manual right here. So each one of these will need to be set. I'll need to check through everything, make sure that this is actually square to the fence, make sure that everything's operating the way that I expect it to. But I'll go ahead and do an entire episode on getting this guy up and running so that it's getting me the results that I want. But overall, there is an introduction to the brand new tool that I'm pretty sure none of you have seen before. Again, unless you're an old timer and you've been in woodworking for a while, this is a pretty interesting and rare tool. And actually looking online, it's also pretty bifurcating. There's a lot of different opinions on it. Some people love it, some people hate it. So far, I mean, I'm probably still just in the new tool excitement phase, but I love it and I'm super excited to have it. But we'll see it as I get to know the quirks. One of the things that I have heard is that if you don't have this, it is an absolute death trap. But that's like any of the tools in the shop, I think, where if you're not having your safety equipment in place, then it's potentially very dangerous. I mean, probably no more dangerous than a table saw is, if I'm being honest. But this guy has a great one in place. Overall, I'm super excited. Thank you guys again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I am super excited to have this tool in the shop, and I hope that you guys learned a little bit on how that works, or how the Uniplaner works and how a jointer works at the same time. Since they're both very similar tools, the Uniplaner is just a different take on the jointer itself with a few extra added capabilities. So thank you, Rockwell Delta, for making this tool. I'm super excited to use it, and I'm super excited for the niche advantages that it provides me while I'm woodworking. If you guys like the videos that we're putting out here at Northwest Craftsman, or heck, even if you just kind of like the videos we're putting out here at Northwest Craftsman, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. The channel is growing on a regular basis, and I love seeing it grow because I have more of you guys around to ask great questions, to answer other people's questions. It's just awesome. So thank you guys so much. That if you have already subscribed, and if you haven't, I would invite you to join if you feel like I have earned your subscription. It's going to be more videos like this. We're also in the middle of a joint series where I'm going through and doing a whole bunch of different joints. And this was just a break because I got a new tool in the shop, but we're going to go through and do a bunch more joints and everything that you need to get through and make just about any joint you need for your project. So stick around, subscribe, look for those videos, and we'll see you guys next time. Alrighty, have a good one.